bust that rock out and you can take that away, because inevitably that will become a constriction point. All it takes is one tree down in that narrow area, and you could back everything all the way up into flowway 3 and 4.
Chris, this is where the road and a bridge will go across in the future, right there in that right picture. That's where the
Okay.
4-lane county road yet to be built goes, right across that piece.
Okay, I didn't see that in any of our notes. Thank you, Ed. When, do they have an estimated time?
Money.
Money, well, it needs to be opened up though in the short term. Otherwise, there's that potential. The next is flowway system 1. And that one runs from tree line down through the lake system, across I-75, up along the west side of I-75 to Lake 132, to the marsh, to the slough. Next, please. The crossing under tree line's in pretty good shape. Extreme Divers did an analysis. They had a little bit of sedimentation, but hardly any. I'd make sure that your maintenance folks keep an eye on that upstream side. As you can see, the floating debris piles up on the upstream side of the box, and that can give you a constriction, but nothing significant. Next, please. Then you go through this lake, giant wide lake, kind of like we were talking about with flowway 3, but this has been dug all the way out. The lake banks are being maintained. I imagine you've got that in your budget somewhere, or one of these subdivisions, whether it's Colonial Country Club or Botanical Lakes, is maintaining it. But you can see that that can move a ton of water very easily. And it ends with that little box culvert you can see up in the upper right-hand corner of the second picture. Next, please. And that's that box culvert. The upstream side looks great. The downstream side is going into a jungle. But that box is pretty darn clear too. Extreme checked it, found very little sedimentation, so there's really nothing that needs to be done underground or in the box. The top of it's covered with exotic vegetation, could be considered a district permit violation or county violations, and it would probably be a good idea to clean it up just for aesthetics, and because it's going to be a seed source for your next section. Next, please. And your next section is an open channel section between this box culvert and the culvert under I-75.
Here's the problem.
Yep, this is a nightmare. During the dry season, the vegetation has grown all the way across. Now that the water's come up, it's catching all the debris that's floating downstream, and this really, really needs to be taken care of. This, I don't think you want to do a simple regrade and spray. I think you're going to want to put in a TRM.
What's that? What's a TRM?
TRM is the turf reinforcement mat.
It's what we did at Stony Brook years ago.
What it is you clear it out and you set the fabric down in to hold the soil. It prevents the growth from coming up. You can sod then the sides with some bahia grass, something that's easy to maintain, and it'll prevent the kind of growth you're seeing here. And it cuts down your need for maintenance spraying. Maintenance spraying can become real expensive. When we get to the cost, we'll talk about that. Yes, sir?
Did you by chance look at the South Florida permit on this? We're sitting here and Mike Tisch gave us a 2008 picture of this. It's kind of a before, right after. That waterway used to go right up to the edge of the interstate. Somebody in 2008 built that 130-foot long, 11 by 6 box, and it was flat. You now go out there and it's a 20-foot high mountain over the top of it. So if you build it to have a transition to go from one side to the other, why would you put a mountain in there? I can't find anything that explains why that was done.
My guess from what we've seen is that it was a service road at one time, and when the projects became disconnected and the service road wasn't needed, they turned it into a berm. But it makes no common sense, that's for sure.
To me, remove all that dirt and flatten it back out, and then put in your trapezoidal channel. Because we already have a restriction. You're going from 2 11 by 6s to 2 8 by 4s.
Yes. And it's got to be opened up.
It's gotta be.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the worst that we'll see as we go on. Next we go to I-75. The I-75 pipes are in relatively good shape, and that's really FDOTs. You want to get after them to do that maintenance, but right now it doesn't seem to be a problem. What you're seeing also now is the bottom end of the big ditch canal that runs along I-75. You can see in this picture, there's a shallow area right before the bend, right there. And there's a bunch of riprap that goes across the bottom of that basin, or that swale, that needs to be taken out. It appears like it was at one time maybe a walkway people had put in as a temporary or some type of a break, but that's causing a constriction and a restriction. And I think what we would propose is, you can see the eroding on the energy side of the swale and the deposits or the siltation on the slower side. What we would recommend is take that riprap and don't throw it away. Use it to channelize that area so that you can cut down on the erosion and make that function a little more.
You take an invert here, shot. It's supposed to be at 2.7 or at elevation 17.
I don't think we got one on top
I
of that.
don't think it's anywhere close to elevation 17.
Mm.
It's filled up over the years.
Now, as you turn the corner, next, sir, you've got the nice long channel that runs along I-75. This thing's like 1,800 feet long. Let me double check my number here. Yeah, 1,850 feet long. The channel's wide, it's open, it's flowing, but it really needs some maintenance. It doesn't need to be dredged, but it definitely needs to be spray maintained. You can see the aquatic vegetation, and you can see also the down trees. Those are probably Irma trees that have been there and need to come out. So I would say you need to, that's another element. Once again, the closer we get to that outfall, to 6 Mile, everything you fix from there is going to ripple all the way through the community. So, you know, when we look at drainage problems, I always like to start at the outfall. One, make sure that the receiving water has got capacity, but then start at the outfall and work your way upstream, because if you can find the bigger constrictions near the outfall that you can fix, the more improvement you'll see elsewhere, and you may be able to defer some of the other things further upstream.
For the board, that to the left, the picture on the right, to the left of the tree line, that little green path, that is our access to the flowway. So if you've been down that, it's like riding a stagecoach. It's horrible.
And that's why there was maintenance problems last year.
No, we can
Next,
make
please. And this is the crossing Ed was talking about. These are the 4 84-inch diameter pipes. The pipes themselves are clean. There was very, very little debris in those, but as you can see, on the left-hand picture, there's a tree right in front of one of them. You know, it's just simple maintenance that can be done. And it needs to be done because it's going to be an ongoing problem. Now that is the downstreams, yeah, the upstream side on the left, downstream on the right. Well, actually both on the right. But you can see that there's the vegetation pile up there from floating debris, et cetera, is not that bad. But those areas need to be maintained. Next, please. Then we're into good old Lake 132. This is the one that was choked with aquatic vegetation last year, and we had to do some spraying, and it needs to be maintained. This is after a recent spray event, and you can see that it's starting to die off, and you're getting a little more open water. It's a 32-acre lake, so maintaining a 32-acre lake can be pricey, but it's necessary because if it becomes the sponge that it was before when it was choked with the aquatic vegetation, the water's going to back up there. Next, please.
What makes it worse on this is it's a shallow 32-acre lake. It's only about 4.5 feet deep.
Exactly, and the light gets all the way to the bottom, and therefore the vegetation is tough. And that's what caused last year on the right, the vegetation from the lake and the fish barrier collapse, jammed all that water up, and thank goodness we got it all fixed before I can't take credit for it. Your staff got it all fixed before the storm. Otherwise, it could have been catastrophic. But there it is on the right. You can see the fish barrier and the flow with the damaged barrier. On the left, you can see that's clean and open. Going to have to address the fish barrier probably shortly, whether it's going to the agencies and asking for the requirement of a fish barrier to be removed, or come up with something that we can move far enough away from the weir that it doesn't become a de facto weir. And that's what happened in this other case, is the fish barrier became much more constrictive than your weir, and that was a big problem. Next, please. And then you've got the big marsh. This marsh ties directly into 6 Mile Cypress Slough. This is in pretty good shape, but it does, once again, like Lake 32, it's shallow, it's going to be full of vegetation, and it has to be maintained. And that takes you through the system. What we did next is, based on these priorities, we developed a budget with some recommendations. The items highlighted in yellow are the less aggressive options. What we were looking at there is trying not to put down as much TRM and trying to keep it to spray and clean. The only area that we were looking to go with the TRM was on that one segment between the 2 box culverts by I-75 that was so bad. And as you can see, those budgets are pretty pricey. It's only $15,000 at the take care of flowway 4. Now the left column is the one-time cost for, go in there and do the maintenance work. The right side is a spray and maintain process. That's assuming quarterly spraying. What we've done is we've looked at the budget with the spraying and talked to contractors that we've worked with before on this. And we want to make sure that the contractor included time to check the structures, so that when they're out there spraying the FP&L area, that they're checking, they've got an iron pipe or a piece of rebar, and they're scraping the bottom of those culverts to hear if there's 6 inches or no debris in them. This way you get your quarterly inspection as part of your spraying and vegetation maintenance.
Just
Yes,
real quick. Hey, Chris, did we use all the Armax?
No, we bought extra for the lake, and we have a little extra on top of that, and the pricing on that material has gone up over 20%.
So we could potentially use the Armax for.
Yeah, we bought some extra just for those open channels.
Is that maintenance cost that you're showing, make sure I understand that it's on the blue screen, 60,000 for Lake 132 and an additional 20 for the marsh, that's 80,000
And that
annual operation?
Yeah, that's quarterly spraying. And it
Aquagenics
seems
is
very-
charging us 1/10 of that.
Yeah, and the numbers gave me sticker shock too, and these are budget numbers right now. I mean, obviously, you would bid all this work and see that you could get it, because these numbers did seem very high to me, to be honest.
Well, they're charging us a lot less, but as you can see,
It
we're
ain't
not
working.
getting
It ain't
anything for
working.
that.
Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, this is a good idea for budgeting, but you're right, Ed. When we get into it and you start really taking bids, you'll find some people that'll be too aggressive maybe, and you may decide to disqualify them when you get into that. That's more for the board to decide than your consultant. Now, if you'll go to the next screen, I used the blue so that I make sure I keep them separate in my mind. This is using the TRM and being a little more aggressive in flowway 4 and taking some of those open soil or open channels and going to that. You can see that we were expecting to see a distinct cut in maintenance spraying requirements wherever the TRM was used. Instead of quarterly, we could take it down to semi-annually. And that brings it down. So the price differential is pretty good.
And that your TRM, is that installation only? Or that's product and labor?
Product and labor as we understand it.
So if we have the product, we cut that.
Exactly.
Product's only about 10-15% of the total, so it's the labor's the cost.
Mhm. Well, and the big advantage to the TRM is, your maintenance is gonna go down and your comfort level is gonna go up. Because invariably, when the dry season happens, you're gonna end up with weeds growing across these shallower areas. And the less spraying and the more structural things that you can do to cut down on that vegetation, the better you're gonna be for overall flow. It's kind of funny, the cost differential between them for the one-time cost is only about $10,000. The difference in annual cost is about, I think it was just a couple of $1,000s. So you can get the money back, but it takes more than a couple of years, and then it becomes an economic and a comfort level. There's certain things, you know, it may be more economical to go with just swale maintenance, but you'll sleep better having something like this that's a little more structural.
Did you put a cost in here for the new fish barrier that South Florida is gonna jump on us?
No, sir, I did not.
As I recall, when we did that fish barrier, Bill, you were on that time, I wanna say 25, 27,000 bucks.
No, it was outrageous.
It was outrageous is right, and it didn't work.
Exactly.
It's
and
gotta
that-
be a lot stronger than that we put in.
Are you finished?
Yeah.
May I?
Yes.
I live in Pelican Preserve, and we got some flood, and I've never heard the end of it.
Of course.
Probably won't. But I was out walking around when the water was coming down and very high.
Mhm.
I was out behind some of our homes where the flowway goes under tree line,
Mhm.
and it appeared that there was a huge amount of water coming down toward the tree line culvert and getting blocked up there. And as some of us amateurs talked about it, we were further convinced that there's something wrong with that tree line culvert, especially when we found out that there was no flooding downstream in any other neighborhoods that go down towards 75. So
Chris?
something was rotten in Denmark, if you know what I mean.
Yes, sir.
We weren't moving enough water under that tree line avenue culvert. But you have nothing in here.
Well, Extreme Divers had done that culvert and had checked it, and in their report, they were only showing, my recollection was only like 4 or 5% of siltation on 25% of one side. So whatever may have happened during the storm, that's been dislodged and it's flushed out because those pipes are now relatively clean according to that report I read.
Is it possible that those holes under Tree Line Boulevard are way too small to handle the discharge of water that's coming down both from Pelican Preserve and from the older Gateway section?
I doubt that they're too small. I think that the real constriction is the one downstream between the two box culverts along I-75. And I think what happened is it's stacked up there, and because it's isolated between those two communities, Botanical Lakes on one side and Colonial Country Club on the other, I think what happened is that's kind of overburned, and they don't really discharge directly to it, so it never really got to them. And that may be where the problem was, is you had this channelized flow. You could see it in one location specific. As it spread across that waterway, the velocities and all cut way down because you went from a lake that's like this to pipes, and then back to a lake. And I think the clog was downstream, more so based on what we've seen.
Bill's on point. What the issue is, RWA did a study, and I don't know if it was this board that asked for it or WCI. RWA Engineering did a study of the tree line crossing, the 211 by 6 box culverts. And they showed that there was no, what we call backwater curve created. They did their analysis at 247 CFS. Last year, when we were out doing the testing, right after Irma, we were topping the weir at weir number 2, right upstream of that, and we were popping 400 CFS. That is the problem.
Okay.
There's your problem. It can't handle, and if you take the county's or South Florida's requirement at 37 CFS per square mile, which is your maximum allowable discharge from a development. And you base it on Gateway's 5,200 acres, which was what we were permitted. But in reality, we're serving 6,700 acres. It works out 400 CFS allowable. So we can't handle, and this is the point that I've been screaming about for years, we need to go to South Florida with that hydraulic study and show them, guys, it doesn't work. And Chris was dead on. We could get that water through, very possibly, tree line, and we could get it through that 130-foot section that somebody mysteriously built in 2008. But when you hit I-75 at 8 foot by 4 foot, 8 by 4 is 32, double to 64 square feet. 11 by 6 doubles 132 square feet. We're trying to put a round peg in a square hole. It don't work. We can't get rid of the water. So we can do all the improvements we're talking about here in Gateway, but it starts at I-75. In fact, it really starts at those 4 84-inch pipes and comes back in that channel, and then I-75. It may be that we have to ask for a new pipe under I-75 to get rid of our water.
That can be done.
It can be done.
It can be pricey. I mean, you could look at some type of, like a giant directional drill type
That's the way to do it.
function, because they're not gonna let you shut down the interstate to do it.
It's gotta be a directional drill.
Mhm. And that makes the rest of these prices look like chump change, though. Yeah, but that may be the only way, because, like I said, you start at the discharge point and work your way upstream, and where does it net down the most, and that's where you go. Now,
The first thing that we've got is that problem that he pointed out, and I'm glad you had that aerial view looking down. Right now, are going to South Florida to do any begging for this study. If they take and do the same aerial, or if they take a look at this and they see that restriction, I don't even want to think about what they're gonna say to us.
yeah, they're gonna tell you to take care of your house first.
That's exactly what they're gonna
Bill,
do.
did you finish?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I do have a question. Go ahead.
Now, flowway 4 is the first part,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
That goes all the ways down. So flowway 4 is gonna flood, okay? All right? Because the water cannot go down,
Correct.
is what you're saying, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so flowway 4 is always gonna flood, always, until we correct the section down by 6 miles.
That's a very fair assessment.
It works that way.
Money spent downstream is going to ripple upstream, you know, and you're right, we could fix everything in flowway 4. If we ignore what's in 3 and 1, you'll see minimal improvement, if any.
And Jim brings up a good point. We got 6 Mile Cypress Slough that nobody wants to touch environmentally, so we can do all the work we want. But if we can't get the water into the slough, it just backs up.
And you're right.
I'm sorry.
Go, no,
Are
go
you
ahead.
familiar with the term counterintuitive?
Yes, sir.
Well, everything you said makes some sense to someone that doesn't really understand what you're talking about, except if we ask our residents to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to work on the area in and around I-75, so that the Greater Gateway, including Pelican Preserve, can be, we don't have any, Colonial Country Club and those other neighborhoods down there are the ones that are benefiting from it, and benefiting from it at least as much as we. And it seems as a bad deal, a necessarily bad deal for the Greater Gateway. Good.
I understand your point, and I do.
Where am I wrong? Tell me where.
You're not, because you will be doing a benefit that will reach across boundaries, because your system is not that totally isolated. However, I don't see any reason you couldn't take a budget to them or a bid to them and say, look, you're getting 10–15% improvement in your system by us doing this work. You can't ignore the work, otherwise at some point you're going to have flooding. Right now, they're gonna say, we don't have a problem, so we don't wanna contribute.
The lots are higher.
That happens.
That's the problem.
That happens
They're
in
higher than
society
that.
all the time. You know, it's those of us that work pay for those that don't. It's tough and it's not fair, but it doesn't mean you couldn't go to them and appeal to their sense of good, fair play, justice, honor. I mean,
I don't know how I'm gonna appeal to my own residents and constituents, let alone theirs, for crying out loud.
if you do nothing, eventually this will be a worse problem than you currently have. And you've already got communities that aren't draining as quickly as they should. And at some point, you'll have property damages. And I understand your position. It is a tough one, and it's not really fair.
Where's the good news?
The good news is rainy season's only getting started.
Mrs. Flaherty?
Do you know of any grants that are available?
I do not, but there are definitely ones you could go after. You know, obviously, you could show some regional benefit. Because you're a governmental agency as a CDD, you could maybe get some of the low interest bonds, et cetera. That's not really my specialty, but I think that there's some opportunity.
Yeah, we're eligible for SRF loans.
Yeah, but I'm thinking not loan, I'm thinking more
Right.
grants.
I'm looking at this and I realize that some of the things, like some of the dredging and the laying of the TRM, that has to wait until water levels recede, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
at the end of rainy season.
It's much more cost effective to do it then, or even if it's
Right.
just cleaning the ditches. Now, spraying you can do tomorrow.
And that's what I was gonna ask you, to going and, we may need to open up under I-75.
Sure.
That's not something that we can go out in the next 30, 60, 90 days and do. But some of these things, it appears that we could, help alleviate some of the issues that we have. What things on here can we do in the next 30, 60, 90 days that would be of great benefit? Like cleaning up that one area where it's,
I would definitely send to the one area along I-75, on both sides of I-75, and along your 484-inch culverts, and I would get the heavy debris out of the water and clean those up. And that can be done while it's
Yeah.
wet. You can do it off the shoreline and wading out and using airboats, et cetera. And that would be, you know, something you can do in the rainy season and get rolling. It's a little difficult, but it is not crazy.
A couple of complications. First of all, that section being the mess at the east side of I-75, that's Colonial's responsibility.
well,
Our-
they may
the-
not
the-
be
the
aware
center-
of it.
Oh, yeah, they're aware of it. They're well aware of it.
No, they may not be aware of the debris. They
They're,
may not.
they're well aware of it now. They're well aware of it. They've ignored it in the past, is what's happened. Our issue is that it's in two names as far as ownership of that land, Colonial and Botanica. We don't even have a name in it. The permit from South Florida makes it clear, the way I read it, that it's Colonial's problem to maintain it. After Chris gets done, I'm gonna make the motion that Chris has met with Cal. We give them a notification, get it done in 2 weeks, or we're gonna come in and we're gonna do it and send you the bill. We can't wait for rainy season to get worse and have that be our backup. They built their condos all along that, what I call riverbank. They built theirs high. They don't care. They're not gonna flood. By the time it floods theirs, it's gonna be 2 feet deep in your houses, Bill. That's the problem.
Chris, the items that are on this list for cleaning and maintenance, do we have money in the budget that we can do the things that we can do in the next 30, 60, 90 days, short of laying TRM in the places where it says
I was
TRM?
just dredging because most of that spraying work and even some of the cleaning and dredging, like the conveyance over in Stony Brook, it's not that wet, you could accomplish some of that, so I've actually just been dredging the budget, looking for some money and to accomplish that. I thought about using this fire impact fees that we got 70,000, but it came out of Pelican, so that all went back into the O2 account. Now I'm looking at picking Mr. Preezy's contract apart and just looking at priorities to try to come up with $150,000 to do with this maintenance work.
Take the building. We're not gonna build that building right now. take the building.
Well, and this is just to get that discussion going, so by the
Well, and-
next meeting, we can get some funds together and come get your approval and get a contractor to work.
And, and if you took out the TRM things and assumed that that would be done after November, I'm looking at the other things, that's what I'm looking at, taking the TRM items out.
Chris, while Margaret's talking about that, there's another one that you didn't mention in your report, but the canal, the channel, flowway 4 that Stony Brook comes out of and discharges into, and goes into pond 130. They're controlled by Weir 3. We found the South Florida Water Management District permit for Gateway, Weir 3 is 25-foot width. It was built 20.
I'm sorry, it was what?
It was built 20. There's another problem. So we've got issues that are hydraulic issues. The same amount of water, about 250 CFS going through that weir at 20 feet. If we were able to take that and make it was 25 feet, we'd drop it 12 inches. That's the impact of a mistake like that. South Florida doesn't even know.
Well, you've now set benchmarks at almost all your structures, based on the report I read. You're taking good readings, you're documenting this, get your elevations, get your tailwaters, and it's easy to go to the Water Management District. I mean, you could go to them and say, we're making a maintenance, this is putting it back the way it was originally designed, and you could apply to have that extra 5 feet added right away. You could also use your tailwater to come back and say, you know, when a weir is this big and it's flowing free, that's what most of these engineers design based on. When you start getting historic tailwater where the water's higher than the weir, so it's higher on one side than the other, that tailwater will, using those calculations, you'll be able to apply to widen some of your weirs or your orifices, get them bigger, so that it compensates for those extreme cases. Most engineers don't go through that extra. I mean, this is a big project and it got a lot of real good scrutiny early on. But as Ed said, you know, mistakes were made, whether it was a design issue here, no tailwater design there, or a contractor misreading a set of plans.
Well, and we got patchwork together. This part got built, and then this part got built, and then this part got built. and-
Different engineers, different contractors, different times.
Well, our real problem is right now to do anything on that flow way we're number 3, until we've solved the problem downstream, is all we've done is just dump that much more water on Pelican Reserve. So we gotta watch it
They can handle it.
and provide everybody
Maybe-
with a boat.
Maybe we ought to let the water go over I-75 and flood it there. Maybe they.
Then they'll fix
They
it.
Oh, yeah.
get something fixed.
That would
I
motivate a lot
got
of
a
people.
better idea. Go out there and all those inlets that are on Tree Line Drive that go into our canal, they go on your side of the canal, not on the Colonial side. Why did anybody, I have never seen an engineer in my life do something like that, that you put water as a source upstream of a restriction. I've never heard of that, but we have it here.
It, like I said, barring the idea that we aren't gonna be doing anything under I-75 anytime soon, I'd like to at least do the things we can do. So for the next meeting, can you bring back
You
to
need
us
to have
an
a budget.
idea of what we can, where we can find a little bit of money to get some of these things off and running?
Phase one.
Some of that maintenance
Yeah,
work, we can get our
phase
crews
one,
to go
exactly.
out and
What's,
do.
what falls within scope of phase one that we can
Right,
afford?
exactly. That's well said, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said. Doug, would you say it again, please?
Just, Chris come up with a phase one recommendation and, what I would call funding sources, so how we're gonna pay for it.
Well,
And we had one of our crews out there cleaning up a couple of the structures last week.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Went out there and took a half a day and sent a crew out there, and so that some of this stuff we can do in-house.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
that issue of clearing that weir at I-75, though, I'd say give Cal 2 weeks to get it done, or otherwise we go and bring a contractor in there to fix it and send him the bill.
Yeah, I met with him last week and I'll follow up with him tomorrow.
Mr. Guy?
Thank you, Mr. Do we still own a boat?
Yes, sir. We've actually been using it.
It's called the SS Bill Guy, I think.
You'd like to-
Well, I was one of the ones that didn't want it to be sold if you.
I do remember.
Remember that.
So you have been using it.
Yeah, we've been putting the biological agent in Magnolia.
We should name it.
Yeah, with that boat.
Is there any, can it be used down on the 75 area we've been talking about, or do we have access to an airboat?
We could get an airboat, not a little boat, we could use it if we need to go up and find those pipes. Most of that work we can do from the land.
You wanna go on a 3-hour cruise?
I was just down at Lake Trafford, 6 months ago, so I've had enough airboating, thank you very much.
Well, you gotta watch those, because that channel and that flow, you get in that small boat, it'll suck you right underneath that, culvert.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't get close to that.
You'll be like, well, won't be quite as bad as those boys in Thailand, but you won't be in good shape.
If you all are done with me?
No, I have.
Yes, thank you. She had a question.
I just have a short question. When you looked at flow, Lorraine Dieter at 9859 Weatherstone Place.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Also on the Stony Brook board. Flow 4, you talked about a baffle and increasing the weir by 1 inch. Is that included in the one-time cost?
No, ma'am. As you can see, the weir has $0 on it and $0 for maintenance. It's just what we observed. And I wasn't sure going through this of whose responsibility the weir was, whether it was one HOA's or if it was the overall CDD. So I left it out because the reality is in the grand scheme of things, fixing that weir would only be a couple $1,000s. Placing a baffle, there's a million ways to baffle it.
That's easy.
And depending on how you want to do it and what kind of maintenance you want to have, it can be very expensive or it can be very inexpensive. I know that's kind of a half answer, I apologize for that, but that's really all I can say.
I didn't see it, but I'm not an engineer, so that's why I wanted to ask.
That 72-inch by 6-inch opening that was built 5 feet by 5 inches,
Yeah.
that just shows another example of what we've accepted here, getting bad stuff, because we don't get as-bills from these buildings. You remember when you and I had a tango with, I think, what was it, Banks? Very unfriendly. They weren't going to provide as-bills. I kind of see why now.
Mhm.
Wasn't built right. But to go in there with a concrete saw in February, it's easy.
Yeah, and
Right now, it's
I've-
underwater.
I've had people in the community offer to do it, free of charge.
You're lucky somebody didn't put a stick of dynamite and float it down there and just let it blow it up.
Or take a sledgehammer to it.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen in projects where people get so frustrated that they just go in and sledge it open. Say, we'll deal with the fines later.
But that baffle's easy to put on, very easy. But that notch, that is a major restriction.
It is.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity to work with y'all again.
Good,
Thank you.
good report.
Good job.
Thank you.
What's the name of your company?
I've got these companies.
Card. They did not send a representative. All right,
You're
the
welcome.
district office site building and proposal. 4B.
To that.
Going back to, would like to make one comment, going back to the lack of maintenance in these areas, I thought all of these areas were in our aquagenics contract. Have they not done any of this work that we're?
They got to the Area 9 flowway and just did a recent application. We had talked to them about that, but the one going into Silver Lakes, as you can see, is remiss in some spraying. And we'll be talking to them shortly about
Okay.
that also.
All right, just wanted to ask that question.
And basically, this was just an informational item that we put together, and the board had inquired, what would it cost for us to put a mobile out here, a structure? And so we went to an engineering firm and got engineering estimates from them to do the development order, all the engineering you need to have to get a plan, get a permit, Lee County development order, and then follow-up certifications. And that estimate for the engineering was 27.2. And then we looked, of course, we had been looking at the buildings, and we had a building price of 140, and then we added in furniture and all the other site development costs. and including charging ourselves a utility connection fee for water and sewer. And turnkey, to put a 8-office, brand new building in over there, $233,000.
You know about a temporary building?
And
That's
engineering,
modular.
That's modular, and that's everything.
That's, and we contacted Lee County that that's permittable.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Will they permit a new building here?
Yeah, yeah.
They'll allow us to build a new building on this site also?
Yeah.
We don't have it, because that one engineer that came in, we had that footprint of 6,000 square feet of this structure.
Right.
There was some question about how much bigger it could be. I thought the
And
number
it
was
just can't be
50.
attached.
We what? I thought it was 1,500 square feet was the number I had in the back of my mind, that we could only add to this building.
I have to look back, I think what they were looking at square footage, it was based on the stormwater pond and the drainage of the impervious pavement that we had. But I don't
Okay,
think-
well, where I was going was, if it's $233,000 to build a 60 by 36 module, what does it cost to build a 60 by 36 permanent?
Yeah, and all the costs would probably be the same except for that building cost. You know, the landscaping.
What are you looking at, $180, $200 a square foot?
Probably, yes.
So if you go that same 60 by 21, 200, that's what, 400,000?
Yeah, I would say the minimum for a conventional structure.
It seems awful high.
I thought it was low. 400,000 versus 233 to put in a, what do you call a modular? Almost would raise the question, why do the modular? Just put in the brand new building.
And I do not have a price on a brand new building.
I thought that there was a restriction, the reason we didn't go that route is that there was a restriction from Lee County to build a permanent building on this site greater than, I thought somebody said 1,500. Because if there is not a restriction on the size of a permanent building, now you're looking at 233 versus $400,000, $500,000. And before, when we were talking about doing stuff, we were looking at $750,000, $800,000. So we were looking for a way to cut. There's a place to cut right off the bat.
I'll get those costs and bring them back to the next meeting for comparison.
If you would, and I mean, the whole thing about the office expansion is that we really seriously have to look at doing it because we can't add any staff unless we do. It makes it
Don't
very
understand.
difficult to add staff.
That's all, it's just for informational items.
Thank you, Bruce. All right, 5A, aerators at Pelican Preserve.
And I'll also take this item, Mr. Geppert's not here today. Joe Schofield is here to represent PPAC, but this is just additional aeration for their ponds work group. They're putting aerators in all the ponds in Pelican, and this is just another phase of this, and it's $45,150. It was approved by PPAC, and it's in their budget.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second, any discussion?
Who's the second?
I heard,
Give Doug,
I heard
Doug beat me
Doug
to it.
first, but it
Oh,
may be because he's closer.
Only discussion, the other day I took a tour of both, our entire communities, both Pelican and Gateway. And it is a drastic difference in water quality of the Pelican Preserve ponds versus ours. And we have no aeration. We have no aeration.
Okay, I'll call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, you got aerators. 5B, adding internet provider and phone service.
Okay. All right, this just kind of as a follow-up too, I mean, this has been months. After talking with CenturyLink Comcast many times, our IT vendor, basically is what he has recommended is not getting rid of Comcast, so avoiding the buyout of the contract, keeping them, scaling down the service, getting rid of all the phone lines, it'll make the bill much less. Adding CenturyLink only the fiber, not the $400 and some a month whole new phone system. We would have two providers of internet here, Comcast and CenturyLink, with CenturyLink being the primary connection, it's a better, faster connection. We would then purchase our own phone equipment and license for the voice over IP, and we'd use that fiber connection. That monthly bill is pay as you go, and it would only be about $40 at most a month for what we use. So we'd be putting an upfront investment in the phones, we'd own the phones, we'd have them. Our IT vendor would manage that, like they manage our other stuff on the server, and then we would just have that phone provider in the licenses. Is what really sells it, is it's pretty much the same price, a little bit less than what we're paying now just for our Comcast and all of our analog phone lines. But what it does is it'll be, CenturyLink is the primary connection, and if CenturyLink goes down, it automatically seamlessly just rolls to Comcast, our secondary connection. Our phones wouldn't be out, our internet wouldn't be out, nothing would be out. And then once CenturyLink's up, it roll right back. So it's basically a way of, it's gonna be an upfront investment. It'd be much better service all around for our phones, our internet, everything. And really, we wouldn't be looking at much, it really shouldn't be anything that much.
With the Comcast contract, I know that it was a lot to buy it out. At the end of that contract, would you phase them out completely, or would you keep them as a backup?
We keep them as a backup month to month. I
Okay.
mean, we could phase them out. It'd be, that bill would be, because we'd also be keeping those analog phone lines that we already have with them for like the fax, the fire, the security. We have to keep those. We can switch them to CenturyLink, but it'd be an added expense. So keeping Comcast month to month,
It's not a big deal. Okay.
So I mean, adding redundancy is not a bad thing.
Right.
Right. And not just in the event of hurricanes,
Right.
or ill weather. The one thing I have is, I'm not a big fan of outright purchase for equipment like this when it comes to phone systems or technology-based purchases. One, it gets outdated. Two, we look at what our infrastructure looks like today versus where it may be in a year or even 2 years with additional building, or we never know what's gonna happen, how our needs are gonna change. When you own that equipment, normally your buyback is fractional. It's basically throw away the minute you purchase. Did you look at lease options with CenturyLink versus the purchase, and that's my biggest issue.
Yeah, and I see where you're coming from, and the issue is, and the only thing, CenturyLink offers you to use their service at much discount price, and you can buy the phones. But to me, it just doesn't seem like a good way to go. So the only other way to do it is paying for the service. They provide the phones, everything, at $400 and some dollars.
And let me ask you a question: where are you purchasing the phone? Is it through our tech
Yep,
contract?
and he doesn't mark up any of the product, and actually these phones, the price that he quoted us at was like $10 less than I could even find it for online. And they're actually a little
Same
bit-
model, or?
It's one model up
Yeah, okay.
from what everybody else would provide.
All right, so that makes.
And
makes
I know
sense.
it outdates, it goes bad, I mean, hey.
I mean, leasing through
it's
like
possible that we
one
use it.
one telecom company versus like a Comcast or a CenturyLink, normally they give you a base model.
Right.
They jack up 35%. So if you're getting better equipment at a better cost.
And
that-
yeah, and-
But I would just want to know in the contract, what is your upgrade cost? What is the maintenance? Just some of the details in the contract. And you don't have to tell me that now, just make sure we pay attention.
Right, and the IT vendor is the one who would
Service.
service the phones
So
and
the service
everything.
contract we'll have with the IT vendor on top of what we had today?
It's in here, it's $50 a month. At Nopi, that's our IT vendor. It's $50 a month for them to manage and monitor everything. And then, yes, if they have to service anything outside of, obviously, if the phone equipment's in warranty, parts, things like that, anything outside that, we'd be paying him, and he just charges.
And does that give us enhanced capabilities as far as call forwarding?
Oh, yeah.
And, all features and functions, we're not limited?
It's got a whole laundry list
Okay.
of all the things. They can be forwarded, you can, like when you step away from your
You can
your
forward it to the
desk,
field if
it
you're-
goes to their cell. The other cool thing is too, I know previous places I've worked have always had it, if somebody leaves you a voicemail, you get an email sent to you with it.
Okay, that's.
So there's other things
Okay.
like that we get,
Mike, how does this address the new temporary building?
So we've talked to him about that, 'cause, I mean, we've been telling him about it for a while, that we may be doing that. Essentially, and the only, so is what he told me, and in regards, I think there's like 5,000 in that quote for the building Chris just showed of tech costs to run things out there. Basically, is what they do is they run a line from our server room, just regular Ethernet, to the facility. The only thing to look at, because he told us is what we need to look at doing was potentially running like Cat 6 to our workstations. And we said, you know, because right now we're not getting as much speed and quality since it's being filtered through phones and other things. But right now we have 5 people in 2 offices, it's not ideal, so we didn't want to run, although, you know, it's silly. So assuming you get the new building, it'd be the cost to run that line over, he'd hook everything up there, this equipment transports over.
My question was, would we have the redundancy in the new building, or we
Yes.
just go with one?
No, we'd still be
Would
redundant.
still be redundant.
Everything's done in the server room, and then those feed over to the other building.
Kansas?
Yes, I want to thank you for looking into this. When I questioned the Comcast and CenturyLink last time around, I do appreciate it. And I know we've talked about this thoroughly, because I did have questions, so I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Quick comments.
Quick comment. Having served on the cable committee for Stony Brook, and we spent months on it, CenturyLink was not a good vendor, in our opinion. And going with multiple vendors, you get what I always call the shield when you have a problem. It's always the other guy. You have to go back, and we've dealt with that at Stony Brook too. And I just don't think it's a good idea. Did you ask Comcast about putting in fiber?
Yeah, and their fiber service is $750 a month, just compared to $164. It's a dedicated line. And I don't, you know, I don't have, I know.
764 versus 164, is that what you said?
$750 a month for Comcast compared to $164 at CenturyLink.
And you don't think there's a difference
There,
in quality of service?
that's what I mentioned, the $750 was a dedicated line, which we can't justify the use of $750 a month for a dedicated line when the other fiber is already much better than what we're on now. And for the 164, I mean, that's, and we're paying over $400 a month for the phones.
And thank you, Lorraine. What we are doing there is much different than what he's talking about, so.
I still don't like the idea of multiple vendors. I've dealt with that in the past.
I understand. Quickly, please.
Thank you. I was also on the broadband committee for Hampton Park. Ed is very well aware of what we did in Hampton Park. Over coax, you can get 2 gigabits per second. You don't need fiber. That's a waste of money. 2 gigabits, and it's getting ready to go even faster with 5G. So I think fiber's a waste of money. I think you can do it all with coax. Thank you.
On comment to that, we're currently the highest plan that's offered without switching to fiber.